I saw Kassad say the other day that Fallen should drop the op and just become a rifling IGL the way, Kerrigan, you might not know this, used to be an opper and a star player way back in the day, and Fallen maybe should do the same. It's interesting because before he said that, I had actually already had the stance that Fallen doesn't, to me, feel like that bad of an opper. It's everything else that he feels like he struggles with. And one of the things about Furia is, if I ask if Fallen's washed, yeah, he's not nearly as good as he once was. People have cited him, I think it was Device or Kenny S that cited him as like the scariest player he's ever played against, including Simple, that Fallen could just kill you anywhere and he was an absolute menace. Fallen is not that currently. However, since taking over the IGL role in Furia, their T-sides actually look pretty good. I feel like when he has an op, although to be fair, he also forces the op and it kind of hurts their economy a decent amount because he needs to be on the op so often. Even on maps like T-side Inferno, T-side Nuke, where a lot of teams go away from the op and they stick their opper with a rifle more often than not, he's going to be opping most of the time. But when he has the op, he does a pretty good job, to be honest. I feel like sometimes he's a little more sacrificial than he needs to, jumping in like a lunatic as if he can't kill them with the op, when very often he does. The problem is with Furia, number one, are their CT sides are criminal. And some of that, honestly, I feel like is to do with Cello. Some of that is to do, Fallen always feels like he's one shot short of making a great play. He'll make like 2 shots and then the third kill that would win his team the round, he misses that one. He doesn't miss a ton of super easy shots, which is why I kind of support him with the op. But the problem is, yeah, he's not necessarily as good as most of the oppers that are at the top 10 level. So I could definitely see a logic behind putting him on the rifle, but it almost feels like he definitely has the potential to make it to the right level with an op. I feel like some of his reactions and some of their CT side plays just feel like they're straight out of like 2017 that just don't make sense in today's CS, specifically the macro plays from Furia as a team on their CT side, where Fallen, he makes a few mistakes, he plays very aggressive, but if you look at the previous round, that was a pretty good round, and I've watched a bunch of games because I wanted to make sure it wasn't just him having one good game, and this generally feels like how he usually performs. Statistically, he's going to be at the middle or mid-bottom of the scoreboard, but when he has the op in hand, he's playing well, and he goes for quite a few entries. He's got like the highest opening kill percent of any opera that I've found on rounds that he actually has the op, and yet he actually finds like 63-64% of the kills, like an opening kill, opening death ratio, right? Which is as good as anyone else. So it feels like he's quite strong with the op. He still hits shots. Eye test wise, he still feels like a great opper because he hits hard shots all the time and hits them extremely quickly. But there are, moments like this where he just to be fair, it felt like Stown was probably saving at the same time. Sometimes he just pulls out his pistol or pulls out his knife in situations where it's like, well, you could just be a little more aware. Now, one thing is Fallen could be running into kind of the ultimate situation where, and I think this is definitely true on their CT sides, when you play against Liquid, it feels like you see teams that will just hold angles and wait for ultimate to inevitably peek into them somewhere. So you either get the kill or you give, at least you know where he is and you can try and deal with it in that way. On their CT sides, it feels like teams are doing that a little bit to them. Not so much on Inferno as much as on other maps. And then on the other hand, when he's not getting an entry, he feels kind of static. He feels like he's not moving around enough. Their CT sides just in general don't feel like they're moving around nearly enough. But watching him on the T side, he made the play through the smoke there. It's a pretty risky play, but a play that you can make occasionally to try and catch someone off guard. Worked out flawlessly. Makes the call to make their way back around towards the A site, into an empty A bomb site. Really well called. And they just win a free round 5v4. Fallen got 1 kill out of that. Doesn't really show up on the scoreboard. Now he's 5-5, which is not necessarily what you want out of your opper. But with an op in his hand, I think 3 rounds he's at an op, and he's got 4 kills out of those 3 rounds, if I remember correctly. And that is what you want your opper to be doing. Again, some of the things he's doing are insanely aggressive to the point that I just wonder if you can really necessarily pull this off against top teams. But I watched their game against phase. I've watched him against really good teams, and he somehow manages to continue to pull it off. But there's a smoke for coffins, by the way, from bottom mid. The reason that's quite nice is you can throw that as a fake and then go mid if you want, so it opens up a lot of opportunities. Probably not really that relevant to even bother knowing that if you're just playing in matchmaking, but whatever. He hasn't really seen much to do much. That's why T-side opping. I mean, T-side opping on Inferno a lot of the time just turns into playing after plants, right? Because it's hard to entry with the op, although Fallen is very willing to do so. But then he's going to go into this play where he jumps out apartments first with the op out, which is just wild. It's just a wild play, an absolutely insane play, but still somehow he survives. He ends up in this situation. He's gonna find a kill somehow, and they'll win the round as well. But this some rounds when he does these types of plays, I'm like, dude, you're playing as if you're just never gonna hit these shots with the op, but you are usually hitting. It almost seems like he hits all of the harder shots and most of the easier shots, but like not all of them. He misses occasionally. On this round, they're on kind of an anti-force. It's a couple of saved rifles and pistols from Astralis. They're gonna go for the arch wrap, and Fallen is gonna drop the bomb over, and then he's going to try and make his way up lane, which does make sense against guns, I think, to some extent. But when you're playing against pistols, I don't think this is a play he should be making in general, because when he dies, not only does it allow Stound to pick up an op, the op is always going to be easily retrievable if you die there with no support. Maybe if K-Serrato was like closer to top mid, then it would make a lot more sense to protect from that type of flash play. But not only does it make the retake very much winnable with an op in hand to turn the round in the CT's favor, but you also allow them to take that op into the following round. It's going to make it a lot harder for you for the rest of the half, right? Now Device has an op. Maybe he wouldn't have had an op if not for that death. When I look at Furia, I really feel like, I'm going to have to say it, I feel like Cello is kind of the issue, in that Cello is in a lot of reasonably good positions, and he is the most inconsistent player I've ever seen. He basically doesn't have average games. He doesn't have a game like this one for Fallen. I think Fallen goes 0 KD, and he, like, as in +0. And not only that, but he drops like a 1.0 rating. And you look at Cello, and he's either dropping like a 1.4 or a 0.6. There is almost no in between. It's actually unbelievable. But again, I don't feel like Fallen is necessarily the problem. I mean, he just peeks in and kills Device. Again, this doesn't feel like a one-off. I've watched more than a few games with Fallen over the course of a few months, and this seems to be generally how he plays. Now, whether he can pull this off if you're playing against Na'Vi, if you're playing against Spirit, is a different question. Here, this is a situation, he ends up peeking into Cadian and dying. That does feel like, to some extent, the idea that you can, if you just wait for Fallen to get aggressive, he will eventually get aggressive, and you can, if you post on it, you're going to get the kill. However, at the same time, Furia had 0 utility in a 3v4. And if you just sit in that spot that Device was, or that Fallen was rather, and you allow them time, eventually what's going to happen, and you've probably seen this 100 times before, they're going to flash and the player is going to swing on you close, you're dead. Right? That's just how that happens 9 times out of 10 in that type of situation. I think that was a fairly, I don't think that, like, if you put pressure on A, maybe you could have drawn out all their utility, but I don't think they really put pressure on A that round. So you know they most likely have some utility to retake with. You just can't sit there. Now you could say he could go to a different position and not get trapped there, but he got himself a kill. He ended up in that spot. He went for the aggressive play. I don't think that's a bad idea in that situation. It just doesn't end up working out. Still, it's a 7-4 T-side Inferno half. You're not feeling too bad about that, and there's still plenty of chance to turn it into a 7 or an 8-5 half rather as they go towards the B site. They end up moving in towards only 2 players, but they just don't get in here quickly enough, so the rotate does get there. The lurk on the other side of the map that was kind of a contingency plan doesn't get anything done, and Fallen just ends up in the middle of nowhere with no chance to do anything. So I don't think you can really blame him for that either. When I say Furia has some kind of criminal CT sides, this is what I'm talking about. And this is so weird to me based around how Fallen came up and how strong SK was at these types of second rounds. If you played like they're going to play, I feel like it just does not work. because Fallen's going to be jiggling mid. This is fine. They don't go for any banana control, which sometimes you can't go for banana control, although usually I think putting a lot of utility into banana, doing a fast hit or a delayed hit is probably your best bet more often than not. At least getting the utility out of your opponents instead of this kind of like, I just really don't like this play. And you end up with 2 players on A, just hoping that they don't go for an apps pop. I mean, if they go for an apps pop, Yuri should a lot of the time be able to get 2 if he's in the right position to dodge the flash. I'm not sure exactly what angle he would need to be in, but even if he gets 2, they get a bomb plant. It's not too bad. But now they're all the way up mid. You just have Fallen back on the bomb site. You do an exec up A. Yuri doesn't get one, which, you know, maybe he should, but he gets flashed out of position. And I think it might be because they know that this is often how Furia play, that they often have one pit, one site in these types of situations. And look, it's a good play from Astralis. You have to accept that. But at the same time, Furia did not make it hard on them. Furia didn't take control of banana. They weren't hard contesting brackets, which is one of the other. Generally, when you look at, for quite a while now, CT side Inferno, second rounds or force buys, anti-force buys, you're looking at either fighting in banana or fighting towards top mid. The key is you can't allow your opponents to take that much map control. They will just exec. Teams have really good round endings now. A lot of teams have very, very good round endings, and they will just take the site and they'll have flashes that push you off of almost every angle, and you're going to end up in really uncomfortable gunfights with pistols close range if you allow that to happen. So although you don't necessarily theoretically want to be fighting over banana or fighting over top mid, those are spots where you can force your opponents to use their utility so that they don't have it later on in the round. By the way, Queserado's fucking nuts. I don't know, maybe there's a reason behind that, but just to me, that just looked like I see a team play like that, and I just think you're just asking to get exec on like that. And the reason it's kind of crazy to me is because LGSK, they were the team that really revolutionized aggressive anti-ecos. I remember at the time, back in the day, I was like, dude, how is Fur playing like this? And sometimes he did play way over aggressive. I'm going to say it straight up. He just did, in my opinion. But it worked because it precisely why they lost that round, because it prevented those types of losses, which LGSK, Kaboom, their original roster, when they were with Kaboom, they ran strats that specifically dealt with teams that played too passive, that just tried to turtle up on the bomb site. But whatever. Part of it definitely is the fragging power. I just feel like the fragging power on Furia on CT sides, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. You'll if you watch this game, you're gonna see what I'm talking about, because there's so many rounds they just don't get a single kill. Like the setups, like whatever with the setups. Again, honestly, the more I think about it, Fallen rifle IGLing could definitely work out. Actually, his rifle, statistically, his rifle's not that bad. I see him do kind of a whiff once in a while that's somewhat unacceptable, but that's like standard for most IGLs, if we're being honest. Almost every IGL does that a little bit. The problem is, when you think about taking him away from the op, in my mind, I'm thinking more like, is he a bad opper? And the thing is, I don't think he's generally a bad opper. And when I see him with the rifle, when he plays against top 5, top 10 teams, when he played against FaZe, he really felt like he got exposed when he had the rifle in hand, whereas he felt fairly strong with the op in hand. However, when I see him, what was that? What was he aiming at? Cadian should never win this 1v3. This is just unbelievable. It is actually unbelievable. Did he not know Cadian was there? Cadian, did he make noise? He was running, then he stopped. Skulls didn't see him? Skulls really didn't see him there? Skulls. I think he was just straight up on his screen. He might have seen a pixel of him, didn't quite notice. That's okay. Did Skulls, his mouse must have hit his keyboard or hit something like the person beside him or something. That's just, yeah. I mean, yeah. But Cadian's going to end up winning this 1v3. He gets the initial 2, takes a little bit, but does finish off Cello, and that's kind of like a killer round. That's a round that if they won that, it would be, the game would potentially be very different. But Fallen goes for the op in the follow-up round. Gets the kill on device, but I mean, he gets the initial entry, rotates over, not an easy shot, gets the kill. Although, to be fair, when you watch Fallen, one of the reasons the eye test is like so good for Fallen is that sometimes he makes these shots harder than they have to be. He's moving around a lot. He's like unscoping and then scoping in to flick onto people. he makes the shots a little bit harder, which means they're more impressive when he lands them, even though another opper could hit the same shot and just make it look easy, and you'd be like, oh, he's not that good. Thinking of like Wonderful and Shiro. Whatever. Nade-wise, I've also seen Fallen miss a stupid amount of nades. Like, honestly, he keeps nading his teammates. But yeah, I'd say this round is a reasonable knock against Fallen. He gets the kill on the device, which is great. The op gets cycled back. He's alone on A site because his teammates both died in mid. He misses the shot onto Cadian. Does he miss that? He missed the shot onto stair, right? He didn't just try and, yeah, he missed the shot onto stair under porch. It's not an easy shot. He's getting shot in the side at the same time, which means it's really hard to get a correct counter strafe at that moment. Honestly, though, the problem is that Fallen seems to realize the situation he's in a macro sense, and he's trying to play his way out of it. He knows they're basically fucked there if he doesn't pick up another kill on the player lane. I feel like if there was a player that actually was Moto that could rotate in and help him, he probably would have played the more passive, safe style and just peek, clear the guy in apartments and go from there. But because he knows that kill on the guy apartments, if the guy apartments doesn't peek, he's just getting overwhelmed and dying and they're losing the round, he has to get more. Feels like he knows that, and that's why he went for that play. But again, if we look at the scoreboard, he's 13 and 14. But at the same time, like, yeah, he's 13 and 14, but have we seen him with the under deliver yet? I don't really feel like he has. Maybe he could have delivered a little bit more in 1 or 2 rounds, but there's nothing he's done wrong, like notably wrong. Maybe there's an arguable moment or two. That's about it. But there's another entry for him. Gets the kill. Turns into a 5v4. Skulls dies on the other side of the map. Yuri dies on the other side of the map. Cello gets 1 and dies. And Fallen is just completely locked out of this round. This is what I'm talking about. Like, what is going on their CT sides? Genuinely. They get 1 kill on an A hit. 1 kill. 1 kill on a straight up A hit. 1. And Fallen does go for some wild aggressive plays, by the way. He's actually going to try and sneak into this. This is like, again, this is a play you expect from a hyper confident, like, this is a play you expect from someone like, I don't know, Simple. Simple's not the greatest one. Who do you expect this play from? You expect this play from hyper aggressive, high confidence oppers. You don't expect this play from Fallen, who's supposed to be completely washed up and terrible. He still makes the play. And I have every confidence he would have hit that shot if it happened. One of the things I think about, by the way, with Fallen that is important, I think, is I remember when Fallen joined Liquid, they had all this talk about like, oh yeah, the young guys, they brought me back up to the meta. I felt like I was behind the meta a little bit. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, dude, it's been like a month and a half since you were on a team. The meta hasn't adjusted that much. What this means is that you weren't following the meta on your last team. That your last team was way behind, I think it was Imperial, that your last team was way behind the meta and they weren't keeping up. And now you have to adjust because you joined Liquid. And I kind of feel like the same thing when I look at this, I kind of feel like, is this the situation? Is he just, maybe I'm reading too much into it? Maybe. But I remember that so specifically that they talk so much about, like, Fallen talked about it, but also the players were like, yeah, he was really behind the meta. He was like making these plays that you just don't make. He was doing these things that just aren't normal anymore, that are old school and not standard. And it was like this big thing. And then but I kept thinking it's been like I don't know how long it was actually, but I kept thinking it's been like 2 months since he was on a top team, like a tier 1 team. Why is he so far behind the meta that this is like a big talking point? Unless he just wasn't keeping up beforehand, before he got cut. But that, again, by the way, is another round where just Cello and Cacerado get 1 between the two of them. Honestly, this isn't every game. I feel like some games are worse in terms of he's just in the wrong spots at the wrong times. The setups just don't make sense with where he is with the op. Or he goes for a little too much, goes for an extra kill. But this does feel like more or less a relatively average Fallen opping game. And it's so confusing because it looks, eye test wise, it looks so effective. He looks like he should be an amazing opper. And he's not quite at the level, again, he's not quite at the level I wish he was at. he does miss shots like that, but he somehow survives it. I mean, that wasn't the easiest shot of all time, and Fallen has talked about sometimes in CS2, it just feels like if you're playing a certain angle, and I think that might be why he plays so aggressive, because he's talked about you play a certain angle and riflers peek into you. If they peek you well, you're just dead. You never even get a chance to shoot back. Again, that feels like why he might be playing as aggressive as he is, but at the same time, I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel like he's done anything necessarily hugely wrong. And CT side is where Oppers generally do their best work. That's actually also where Fallen generally does his best work. But it feels like he could be doing so much more if his team was just... But that's partially on him. He's the IGL, right? They're supposed to be... They need to fix their CT sides, and you can put that on him at least a little bit. But him switching to rifling isn't going to solve that, it doesn't feel like. Cello went 4-17, dude. He went 4-17, man.